Hello, everybody. Glad to see you're here. Thank you for coming. Hi, Dolores. Hi, Kay. Hi, Carmen. Is there a beautiful moon tonight where you are? I don't know if there is here. I haven't looked out of the window recently. And Rebecca McClaskey says, hi, everyone. And Dolores says she agrees there's a beautiful moon where she is, too. Carmen says, hi, Doc, are you there? Oops, never mind. You just spoke up. And hello to you again, Rebecca. Okay, I have a lot to do tonight. I'm going to start off with some very quick news before I get into the main business. But I do want to share the articles in each case, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the first three. So here we go. Okay, an article appeared in the American Prospect. It's by John Walker. He used to write for Firedog Lake and now writes for a variety of sources. Headline is Pelosi can save Obamacare with a one-line amendment. All she has to do is to attach the one-line amendment to a bill that's absolutely essential to pass. She already missed a chance. Specifically, she could have attached it to the CR that the Republicans were anxious to approve of so there wouldn't be a government shutdown. But she did not do that. But she is trying to get a relief bill through right now, so perhaps she'll add it to that bill. Okay. Anyway, the one-line amendment would repeal the mandate, and this would invalidate the challenge to the Affordable Care Act based on the mandate, which is due to be taken up by the Supreme Court on September 10th. So I gave you a link to this article so you can take a look at it at your leisure. So that's the first item I wanted to let you know about. Second item is a little trick that President Trump is doing right now. He got his people in the Department of Agriculture, according to Brett Wilkins, a staff writer at Common Dreams, to include a letter from Trump in COVID-19 food aid boxes. It's a self-promoting Trump letter. It's campaigning. Okay, it's a letter in relation to his re-election campaign. So he's using the facilities of the government in order to promote his campaign for re-election to the presidency. This is clearly illegal. It's a violation of the Hatch Act, which prohibits executive branch employees, and Donald Trump is an executive branch employee, even if he's the chief executive, from using their official capacities to influence elections. So, evidently, Mr. Trump had the Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue, include these letters in the COVID-19 food aid boxes. Wonderful, right? More cheating by Mr. Trump. I have included the link to this also, so you can check this out and get full details for yourself. But I wanted to go through that quickly. So, also during the debate, Mr. Trump stated that excess mortality data shows Trump is lying about COVID-19 being more deadly in Europe than it is in the United States. It has been plenty deadly in Europe, of course, as I think you know. I hear Bonnie making some noise in the other room. She may be trying to tell me something, but of course at this distance it does not work. Hang on a second, I'm looking for... There it is. Looking for something I want to share. That's this article from The Intercept by, it's by Mackey, Robert Mackey, done on September 29th. And he says excess mortality data shows Trump is lying about COVID-19 being more deadly in Europe. So another Trump lie. He held up a graphic, and the graphic is misleading or flatly lying. He cited no source for the statistic, which is his usual thing, I think. Danish researchers supply to The Intercept actual statistics. He stated during the debate that Europe has experienced a nearly 40% higher excess mortality rate than the United States compared to last year. The president said 4 times that Europe has recorded 40% more deaths than the U.S. He said the figure was 33% twice. He put the difference at 38% on one occasion. A week later, he said it was 24% twice. Two weeks ago in a town hall, he said that data on the COVID-19 death toll showing the U.S. hit harder than any other nation shouldn't be ignored because there's a chart just came out a little while ago. Excess mortality rate compared to Europe, compared to other places, is about 25% better here in the United States. He says in one case it's over 60% better, but he never provided the chart. So anyway, you can read this article, but that's another little lie told by Trump in order to deflect from his failure on COVID-19. Of course, here we are always pointing out to you that the proper comparison is not to Europe. The proper comparison is to all other countries in the world, including the European countries. And I always give you these comparisons, of course. Let me make sure I'm up to date tonight. The right figure will be in just a moment. So far in the United States today, as of 9:15, we've had 920 more deaths. We are at 642 deaths per million now. Our total deaths, according to the Worldometer site, is 212,660. By the way, we're now 21 deaths per million more than the UK at 642. We're 4 in back of Ecuador at 646. Ready to pass Ecuador. We could possibly pass Ecuador tomorrow. I think today we had about 5 deaths per million. So in the realm of possibility of tomorrow, we will pass the Ecuadorians in deaths per million, making us 7th in the world, discounting the 2 small countries. that are ahead of us. We'd still be behind Chile, which is at 669 right now. Bolivia's at 680, Brazil's at 680, Spain is 684. But all these comparisons are with the countries in the world that are doing the worst. Of course, there's Belgium at 863 and Peru at 981. But to see how bad we're doing, the proper comparison is to go more to the bottom of the distribution and to compare us with other nations with decent sized populations that are doing very well, the ones that have really done well with the coronavirus. And of course, those nations include Taiwan, which is at 0.3 of fatality per million with 24 million population. There's Vietnam that has close to 98 million people, and they have 0.4 per million. I don't know if we would trust their statistics, but Taiwan statistics are like pure gold. They are trustworthy. They've got control over their statistics, and they're not lying. And there's Thailand. They have 0.8 per million, 70 million people in Thailand. Quite a sizable country. Population not as high, okay, as Vietnam, but we can trust their 0.8 of a million, I think. Well, maybe not. We'd probably be skeptical about all kinds of countries here, thinking that their statisticians are not very good, their number counters, okay, are not very good. The Chinese are reporting 3 deaths per million. We'd probably discount the statistics of China and say they're cheating. Trump certainly would. I've been reading a lot about what China does and how they get to 3 deaths per million. I have to say, I don't think they're cheating. There's New Zealand at 5 deaths per million. They have 5 million people, okay, in New Zealand. But obviously, we're a miserable failure compared to these countries that are doing well. Singapore is 5 deaths per million. Their statistics are probably great in Singapore. Nearly 6 million people, 5 deaths per million. Probably don't have to worry about statistics in Singapore. And South Korea, we know they do a great job with their statistics too. They're at 8 deaths per million, 51 million people. I do that occasionally. The point being here, though, that the proper comparison is not with Europe. It's with those nations of the world that have done a great job in fighting off COVID. And against those, we are a miserable failure. And that's what we should be getting compared to. The press, they react to Trump. Trump controls the framing. Okay. Trump says, we're doing better than Europe. So everybody runs to prove that we are not doing better than Europe, that Trump is wrong. And they consider it a great victory to prove that we're not doing better than Europe. But Europe, generally speaking, is among the worst performers in the world when it comes to COVID-19 virus. Of course, Latin America is even worse. But countries that are doing well, like Australia, the Asian countries, we don't look at them and see how we're doing. Our reporters don't look over there. Why not? What is wrong with them? Can't they read the Worldometer site? I guess not. Okay. Let's get to the main business of the day now. I took maybe 15 minutes to go over these various news items. Oh, look, I see what I'm saying is getting captioned. getting captioned. I didn't expect that. Why is it getting captioned? I don't know. Probably because I turned off the sound. You should be hearing the sound out of my mic, but since I'm turning off the Facebook sound, they're probably captioning it. That's interesting. Okay. I'm glad you're getting the captions. I'm sure that helps. Never seen that before. I think that's pretty cool here. I'm glad that's happening. Okay, so let's get to the main business of the day. First, I want to share what do I want to share? Yes. I want to share an article from Common Dreams on the economy. Headline of it just appeared today. It's by Jake Johnson. Rich, mostly fine, but poorest, quote, completely crushed, unquote, after COVID-19 triggered, quote, most unequal recession in modern U.S. history. I don't think this is a recession. The reason why I don't think it's a recession is because we have 28 million people with unemployment claims right now. We've probably got another 10 million who are unemployed. We've got 38 million people unemployed. And the workforce has gotten smaller, much smaller. A lot of people have dropped out of the workforce. It's likely our unemployment right now, the real unemployment, is running 14, 15, 16, 17, 18%, something like that. We're still getting, what was it this week? Well, when we get into this article, we'll see what it is. But no industry has been immune to the pandemic and the resulting meltdown. COVID-19 has triggered the sharpest economic contraction ever recorded in our history. It's mostly eliminated low-wage jobs at around 8 times the rate of high-wage jobs, the article says. 9 of the 10 hardest-hitting industries in the coronavirus recession are service industries. In contrast, as the Post found, quote, by the end of the summer, the downturn was largely over for the wealthy white-collar jobs had mostly rebounded along with home values and stock prices. I'm quoting now from the Common Dreams article, but they're quoting the Washington Post article on this subject today. The shift to remote work strongly favored more educated workers, with as many as 6 in 10 college-educated employees working from home at the outset of the crisis, compared with about 1 in 7 who have only high school diplomas. A series of charts published by the Post starkly display how the coronavirus recession has hit low-income Americans far harder than other major downturns in recent decades. Jeff Stein tweeted some of the Washington Post charts. There's the 1990 recession, and you can see, what do these colors mean? Let's see. Now the blue is highest earning, the purple are lowest earning people. You can see the 1990 recession, the way it hit the two was comparable. In the 2001 recession, there was not a huge gap. In the very deep 2008 recession, there was a lot smaller gap, even though it was certainly a serious gap. But in the coronavirus recession, you see a heavy downturn in the highest earning 25%, and then a jump up to the point where the highest earning 25% are earning more now, 6 months out, than they were earning before. Whereas the lowest earning people tanked, it just tanked for them. And they've recovered somewhat, but they are way, way below what they were earning at the beginning of the recession. So you can see the graphic right there. Nice picture for you to see to understand it. Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's Analytics, who's a Republican, but he's generally quite objective when he reports facts. Quote, there are very clear winners and losers here, unquote. Quote, the losers are just being completely crushed. If the winners fail to help to bring the losers along, everyone will lose. Things feel like they are at a breaking point from a societal perspective. In fact, the winners don't even have to help to bring the losers along. All I have to do is to allow the federal government to use its sovereign money power to lift the users up. That doesn't mean the winners are going to lose anything. That can be done without taking money away from the winners. The analysis comes as the nation's economic metrics continue to show there is no end in sight. The recession, which has permanently wiped out millions of jobs, pushed countless Americans to or over the brink of financial ruin. As Common Dreams reported on Wednesday, new research by NPR, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health found 60% of U.S. households with children are struggling to afford basic expenses. 60% of U.S. households with children are struggling to afford basic expenses. Commerce Department figures released Thursday show that personal income in the U.S. fell by 2.7% in August, the largest decline in 3 months after the $600 per week federal unemployment supplement expired due to Republican opposition. That was true. There was a Democratic bill on the table to renew that, the HEROES Act. The Republicans went on vacation and ignored that bill. Still ignoring it, even right now. Nancy Pelosi is negotiating with the administration about it, but the senators are just sitting there and preparing to go home again so they can campaign. If they don't pass a relief bill now, they're fools. They're going to pay for it at the polls. Additionally, the Labor Department reported Thursday that 1.5 million Americans filed unemployment claims last week, bringing the estimated number of people in the U.S. who have applied for or are currently receiving unemployment benefits to around 28 million. That's 28 weeks in a row with more new jobless claims in the worst week of the Great Recession, tweeted my former Representative Don Beyer, Democrat of Virginia. With the nation's economic conditions continuing to deteriorate, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Treasury Secretary Mnuchin stalled coronavirus relief talks this week in an effort to reach a deal before lawmakers leave town for their pre-election October recess. We really ought to punish them for all these recesses, you know. I mean, the incumbents need to be punished. They're never in town working on legislation to help us. They're always screwing around to help them. The Democrat-controlled House is expected to vote as early as Thursday. I don't know whether they did. Maybe we'll hear, or maybe some of you have already heard, that they did pass the $2.2 trillion relief package, which was a cutback from the original HEROES Act. at least one thing was good about the cutback. They cut back on the bailouts for the lobbyists. That was good. That includes a $600 a week federal unemployment supplement, okay, another round of $1,200 stimulus checks to most Americans, and around $440 billion in aid to cash-strapped state and local governments. At least that's something. It's not what the local governments actually need, but it should help them to postpone the day when they have to let people go and make the economy even worse. But that hasn't passed yet, of course. During talks with Pelosi on Wednesday, Mnuchin put forth a less ambitious $1.6 trillion counteroffer that proposes a 400-week federal unemployment boost, $250 billion in state and local aid, and another round of stimulus payments. See, they like the stimulus payments because Trump can sign the checks. That's what he wants to do, sign those checks. So the White House, the executive branch, would like to do something. 2.2 trillion versus 1.6 trillion. Maybe they can compromise on 1.9 trillion or something like that, or 2 trillion. The only problem is this is a three-way negotiation. Nancy Pelosi did not force the executive branch to come to agreement with the GOP Senate first and then to come negotiate with her. Instead, she's negotiating with them separately. So she comes to a deal with Trump and his minions, and let's say that deal is 1.9 or 2 trillion. And then the Senate says, screw it. We're not going to do more than 600 million or 600 billion, sorry. And then what does she do? It's all shot into a cockpit. But anyway, she said that today, Secretary Mnuchin and I had an extensive conversation. We found areas where we were seeking further clarification. She said in a statement following her meeting with Secretary Mnuchin on Wednesday, quote, our conversations will continue, unquote. I don't think they're going to continue for very long. The reason being, of course, that they have to go home to campaign. They're getting antsy. They have to go home to campaign. So, okay, so where are we now? We are... So that's where the economy is right now, and that's where the negotiations are to do something about it. Now I wanted to get to Coney Barrett. So I'm now sharing an article written by Bill Blum at the Independent Media Institute. They have a lot of good writers there that publish for them, including Marshall Auerbach and Tom Hartman writes stuff also for them. Okay, but Bill Blum is a good one, a very good one on legal questions. He wants to make 5 grim observations on Trump's Supreme Court and the elevation of Barrett, okay, as the nominee. He says the consequences of Ginsburg's passing and the elevation of Barrett will be horrendous and felt for generations. Here are 5 grim observations to help explain the scope of the anticipated nightmare. I made the type larger so you can see it better. Barrett's going to drive the court sharply to the right. Trump's first 2 appointees did make the panel more conservative, and they transformed Chief Justice Roberts into the court's most important and frequent swing voter. But they shifted the court to the right. Barrett's confirmation is going to create a solid 6-3 conservative control of the court. And while Roberts will remain in the political center, the center itself is going to move decisively to the right. Of course, he's right about that. Specifically, this is what Barrett is like. She was appointed to the federal bench by Trump in 2017, so she's only been there a few years. In her brief tenure, she's written about 100 opinions. Besides that, as a professor at Notre Dame Law School, she taught constitutional law and statutory interpretation until she was appointed to the court. She wrote several influential academic articles and delivered a number of public speeches, so she's got a very large paper trail, so we know what she thinks. Her body of work has been hostile to gun control, critical of Obamacare, antagonistic to employment and sex discrimination claims, skeptical of consumer rights, and also the regulation of business, economic regulation generally. In criminal law, she has questioned the constitutionality of, constitutionality of the Miranda rule, which requires arrestees subject to custodial interrogation to be advised of their right to remain silent. Now that is going back a long way and is a revolutionary idea today because the Miranda rule has been so important and so useful. In immigration law, earlier this year, she dissented from a Seventh Circuit Court ruling that struck down the Trump administration's public charge policy, which bars non-citizens from receiving a green card if federal authorities believe they're likely to apply for public assistance. The policy, Trump's policy, has since been reinstated as a result of a decision issued by a different federal circuit court. Most distressing of all is Barrett's outlook on abortion and the continuing viability of Roe v. Wade, while stopping short of declaring that Roe should be overturned. She's expressed support for state laws that impose strict requirements on the operation of abortion clinics, placing her at odds with recent rulings by the Supreme Court. And in two dissenting votes cast in 2018 and 2019, she endorsed an Indiana law that required fetal remains, I guess those are remains of abortions, or maybe stillbirths, to be buried or cremated after an abortion. Yes, it has to do with abortion. So you can imagine, there's a woman who's had to go through an abortion. And of course, that's always hard. It's always hard. It involves very complex feelings. It's a tough decision for women to make. They make it. They do what they think they have to do for their own lives. And then, to require them to have a funeral for the fetal remains, subjecting women to that who don't want to do it, that is incredibly cruel. That is cruel and unusual punishment in an area where we don't often talk about cruel and unusual punishment. Anyway, Bill Blum says if you want a historical parallel to measure the potential impact that a Barrett for Ginsburg swap would have, don't look to Gorsuch, who succeeded Scalia, or Kavanaugh, who replaced Kennedy. Look instead to Clarence Thomas, who filled the vacancy left by the retirement of the liberal legend, Justice Thurgood Marshall in 1991. Like Thomas, Barrett is a staunch and inflexible proponent, of originalism, quote unquote, the jurisdictional philosophy popularized by Scalia and Robert Bork, too, I believe, for whom Barrett clerked, she clerked for Scalia, from 1988 to 1999 after graduating from Notre Dame Law School, where she ranked first in her class. Okay, what originalism says is that core legal terms and concepts like freedom of speech, due process, and equal protection should be interpreted by judges today according to the original public meaning they had when they were first inserted in the Constitution or added by subsequent amendments. Also, like Thomas, which, by the way, would invalidate the extension of the free speech rights in the federal Constitution to all of the states, the First and Fourth Amendment rights. Basically, the extension of the Bill of Rights to the states was accomplished by the 14th Amendment, interpretations of the 14th Amendment at some later time. The only saving grace of the originalism that I can think of, is that I can't see how, under the doctrine, of originalism, that the interpretation of the 14th Amendment or the interpretation of the amendments to the Constitution will allow for an interpretation of corporations as persons on a par with biological persons and having the same rights. That's an interpretation invented by the Supreme Court that actually had its origins as late as 1880, long after the 14th Amendment was actually passed by the Congress. That certainly was no part of the original meaning of the 14th Amendment. I'm not saying that corporate personhood, well, I think actually corporate personhood, in the sense we're talking about it, probably did get its start in that 1881 decision. I think it was 1881, that railroad case where something written by Justice Field was misinterpreted because of the misplacement of a comma, and served as a precedent for a lot of what went on later to make corporate law so dominant in the Constitution. Anyway, also like Thomas, Barrett has questioned the importance of adhering to past Supreme Court on precedent decisions, writing in a 2013 article for the University of Texas Law Review, quote, "I tend to agree with those who say a justice's duties to the Constitution, and that it is thus more legitimate for her to enforce her best understanding of the Constitution rather than a precedent she thinks clearly in conflict with it," unquote. She voiced a similar position in a 2016 article she co-authored for the University of Pennsylvania's Journal of Constitutional Law, acknowledging that adherence to precedent presents, quote, "a notoriously difficult problem for originalists," unquote. And by the way, Barrett is a religious zealot, even more than Thomas. She and her husband Jesse, a former federal prosecutor, are reportedly members of People of Praise, a small, tightly knit, patriarchal, charismatic Christian sect based in South Bend, Indiana, that professes admiration for, quote, "the first Christians who were led by the Holy Spirit to form a community." I'm sorry. There's something a little funny with that. Because weren't the first Christians who were led by the Holy Spirit to form a community still Jews? I mean, if Amy Coney Barrett is such an originalist, why doesn't she keep kosher? Sorry, folks. Couldn't resist that. In a 2006 law school commencement speech at Notre Dame, Barrett urged graduates to become a different kind of lawyer who sees that a, quote, legal career is but a means to an end, and that end is building the kingdom of God. If you can keep in mind that your fundamental purpose in life is not to be a lawyer, but to know, love, and serve God, you truly will be a different kind of lawyer. Yes, you will. You'll be a lawyer in conflict with the freedom of religion guarantees of the First Amendment to the Constitution, in my view. According to the Washington Post, Barrett was, quote, a paid speaker 5 times starting in 2011 at the Blackstone Legal Fellowship, a summer program established to inspire a, quote, distinctly Christian worldview in every area of law, unquote. It shows students, quote, how God can use them as judges, law professors, and practicing attorneys to help keep the door open for the spread of the gospel in America, unquote. Religious wars in America. Anyway, 2, the second grim thing. Barrett's nomination is the culmination of a decades-long Republican push to remake the judiciary. No group has been more influential in the counter-revolution than the Federalist Society. From its founding in 1982 by 3 law students at Yale and the University of Chicago, the society has grown to include more than 200 chapters at law schools across the United States. From its base in Washington, D.C. today, the society also operates a lawyers division with more than 70,000 attorneys enrolled in chapters and practice groups in 19 cities. Barrett is a former Federalist Society member. The other Republican appointed justices on the court, Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Thomas, Alito, and Chief Justice John Roberts, are also either current or former members. So not only has Trump turned over the court to conservative justices, but he has turned over, or is about to have turned over, the court to Federalist Society current or former members. So Blum points out Barrett will be Trump's 3rd Supreme Court justice in the past 50 years. Only Richard Nixon, who added 4 justices, has exceeded that total. And Richard Nixon did it in more years than Trump. Trump has also been highly successful in placing Federalist Society members on the lower courts. I guess I have to add here that Obama would have had 3 justices in 8 years if the Garland nomination had not been blocked by Mitch. Trump has also been highly successful in placing Federalist Society members on the lower courts. Thus far, the Republican-controlled Senate has confirmed 53 Trump judges to the federal appellate courts and 161 to the district trial courts. He's turned over the courts to the Federalist Society, in essence. Trump is banking on Barrett to support him in the event of a disputed election. Now, whether that will happen or not, I don't know, because as Bill Blum says, Trump is a man of dubious intellectual rigor. He may or may not fully comprehend or personally care about the long-term impact his judicial nominees will have on American law and society. He may not also comprehend what Amy Coney Barrett's specific commitment to originalism in the Constitution might cause her to do in relation to a disputed election. I don't know if he understands exactly what impact that would have. He expects her to basically a sellout to him because he appointed her. I don't know if that's all that predictable. It may be predictable. She may indeed, underneath it all, be a person of low moral character, but she may also be a person so committed to her point of view that her loyalty to the president who appoints her may be questionable, depending on the circumstances of the case that she hears. Trump knows full well that under Department of Justice policy, sitting presidents cannot be indicted and prosecuted for federal crimes. Remaining in the Oval Office while the statute of limitations on his misdeeds expires is his stay out of jail ticket. Trump has been working feverishly to undermine public confidence in the election because he's trailing Joe Biden in most polls. Unable to restrain himself, he disclosed on September 23rd that he expected the election to end up in the Supreme Court in a replay of Bush v. Gore, the infamous judicial coup d'etat that handed the 2000 presidential election to George W. Bush. He's right to call it a coup d'etat. It was that. The ninth justice, Trump insists, will be needed to break any 4-4 ties in order to determine the winner of the election should disputes over state voting results reach the Supreme Court. Enter Barrett, Trump's choice to deliver him a second term by judicial fiat. 4, the Democrats must support structural reforms to take back the courts. The time has long since expired for Democrats to meet the Republican judicial counter-revolution with equal resolve. It no longer suffices for Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and their ilk to appeal to the non-existent decency of the Republicans to adhere to constitutional norms and practices. No, they've changed all the constitutional norms and practices. Now the constitutional norm and practice is to play for power, to change the makeup of the judicial branch based on the kind of power structure you want to see in that branch. Trump and the Republicans are interested only in retaining and wielding power, and the Democrats have to meet fire with fire until the situation is equalized. Then we will see what we will see. Structural reforms are essential to respond to Republican tyranny. I absolutely agree with that. These included a minimum ending the filibuster rule in the Senate. I've been advocating for that since 2009, since early in 2009. Someday I'll read you one of those early blogs. Expanding the number of Supreme Court justices as well as the number of lower court federal judges, and promoting statehood for Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico. All of these changes can be implemented legislatively if the Democrats regain a majority and repeal the filibuster. None requires a constitutional amendment. That's right. As the veteran legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin explained in a recent New Yorker column, a number of justices is not fixed in the Constitution, but rather established by statute. Democrats could simply pass a law that creates 2 or 3 more seats on the Supreme Court. To do so would be to play hardball in a way that is foreign to the current Senate Democrats, but maybe in light of all that's happened, that's a game they should learn to play, unquote. And 5th, the slide to minority rule continues. The United States has entered an unmistakable era of rule by the minority. Because of the Electoral College, we have a president who lost the 2016 popular vote, by nearly 2.9 million ballots because of the constitutional design of the Senate, which allocates 2 senators to each state, regardless of population. We have a Republican Senate majority, even though Democratic candidates for the Senate 2018 received more than 58% of the aggregate popular vote for the upper chamber. The confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court will be yet another inflection point in the slide to minority rule. In a real democracy, it would be unthinkable for an outlier like Barrett to receive a lifetime appointment to the most powerful judicial body in the land. Yet here we are. And here we will remain unless and until enough ordinary Americans, not just the operatives who run the Democratic Party, rise up and say they have had enough. And Bill Blum is a retired judge and a lawyer in Los Angeles. He's a lecturer at the University of Southern California Annenberg School for Communications. And so that's it. I wanted to share that one with you. And next, we get to fascism. Here's an article from The Intercept by Rich Benjamin on September 27, 2020. The headline is Democrats Need to Wake Up. The Trump movement is shot through with fascism. The point of the article is to show that getting rid of Trump is not about waiting for whistleblowers' reports or new evidence of some terrible thing that Trump has done that's contrary to democracy or to our governmental norms, our previous governmental norms. But our politicians and we ourselves have to understand that Trump supporters don't care about his autocracy. The better the liberals can go about, and the sooner the liberals understand that, the better they can go about the business of trying to win this election. He says, just pay attention to the urgent MSNBC, NPR, and New Yorker Times exposés concerning the misconduct of Trump, or read the liberal nonprofit industrial complex's battery of watchdog reports, and you'll witness liberals acting as though a lack of information is what is damning our democracy, as though one more smoking gun would save it. If only they knew, the mantra goes. Nope. Neither Michael Wolff's, quote, fire and fury, unquote, nor John Bolton's, quote, the room where it happened, nor Mary Trump's, quote, too much and never enough, unquote, have clarified Trump's reputation to his followers or undecided voters. A major commentator just suggested Woodward's book is the one that will land, quote, like a hydrogen bomb, unquote. But in order to win this presidential contest, liberals need to accept that Trump supporters do not care if he were to scrap millions of mail-in votes or to welcome and even solicit Russian interference for his cause. Not only do some Trump supporters understand that he is an autocrat who will cheat the rules to stay in power, that's precisely what they like about him. The left should understand that many Trump supporters inherently believe that they would fare better under an autocratic system of white supremacy than under a multiracial democracy. So many white liberals and moderates are invested in the idea that authoritarianism can't happen in America because to question whether authoritarianism exists here is to question what they've achieved. Such white people, figuratively and literally, have so much money, property, social status, and self-image invested in the mirage that this country is based on merit and fair play. They have so much invested in the illusion that their political institutions and white cohorts are good actors that will keep everything nicely afloat. Questioning all that fervent, widespread Trump support was forced them to question how their neighbor, their cousin, their uncle, their coworker, their favorite vendor is complicit to a regime that prioritizes their well-being and social privilege as white people, second only to Trump's greed. To acknowledge your aunt's or your own complicity in Trump's nationalist autocracy might make you feel accountable for what this country is. And that accountability to the problem damns you to an accountability to the solution. Exposing the breadth of Trump's proto-fascist moves becomes more necessary and urgent every day in the run-up to this election. Leading up to November's vote, Trump appointed Homeland Security Chief, ordered nonpartisan intelligence officers to stop conducting risk assessments on threats posed by Russia, because doing so could harm Trump's campaign. The security chief also tried to suppress the words, quote, white nationalists from experts' analysis of threats in order to minimize how much this administration has inflamed the growing white nationalist security threat, which, by the way, the FBI has just been talking about as the major national security threat to this country. So Trump's most senior unqualified appointments are trying to politicize, to manipulate and censor the security community's intelligence, especially concerning Russia and violent domestic white nationalists, in order to stay in power. Powerful Republicans in Congress and governorships made barely a peep. The multi-headed hydra of Russian collusion, tear gas for photo ops in Trump, but deliberately lying about the deadlines of a virus that has directly led to 212,000 today deaths, are not confirmation enough of the president's unworthiness to his supporters. Nothing ever will be. Translated for Democrats, this means standing in the way of combating fascism are the millions of his proponents who inherently welcome it. History here is telling. Historical comparisons should not be thrown around haphazardly or promiscuously, but this careful comparison between the past and the present needs to be made. One of historians' most confounding tasks has been to explain what made supposedly honorable, civilized Germans actively participate in the killing of millions of people. In his seminal, if hotly debated book, quote, Hitler's Willing Executioners, Ordinary Germans in the Holocaust, unquote, Daniel Jonah Goldhagen disputes all the myths that historians previously offered to explain Germans' willing participation in such an atrocity. Goldhagen debunks the explanation of situational pressure that hard times rendered Germans incapable of saying no. He disproves the myth of sheer self-interest, that ordinary Germans were just trying to get by. He dismisses the theory of the theory of the myopia of the bureaucrats, that toiling Germans were too busy focusing on the minutiae of survival to be aware of the Nazis' larger systemic killing. He refutes the caricature of cultural predisposition, that Germans were automatons, inclined to mindlessly obey authority. And he dismisses the prevalent impulses to exaggerate the sway of misinformation. The Germans were seduced into submission by Leni Riefenstahl's magic making or their Führer's charisma. Like Goldhagen does with Nazis, we have to avoid pat answers. Could present Americans participate in slaughtering millions as Germans did? Hardly. There are no useful comparisons to be made between Hitler's political methods and Trump's. Significant differences distinguish the political impacts of the Third Reich versus the Trump administration. This country is no Nazi Germany, but America under Trump demonstrably treads into fascist territory. Ours is a country where the president can witness 5 million plus acres burn. Millions of residents flee their homes. Miles of toxic air blight the sky. Blackouts, triple-digit heat waves, and literally not be bothered. We have a leader who knew the deadliness of a virus, lied about his awareness, and still indifferently presides over the subsequent deaths of 212,000 of his fellow citizens and counting. Even during the country's bleak distress, Trump supporters from his cabinet down to ordinary diehard voters put his money and their collective political power ahead of human life, undoubtedly a fundamental feature of autocracy. So I can't help but reveal how the excuses made on behalf of Nazi-era Germans resemble the collective naivete, the delusional pass afforded to roughly 40% of our people. Our democratic freefall is not just Trump. Ours is a nation full of many fascists, Trump's willing executioners. The investigative reports and the common depictions of Trump supporters at a dinner table conversation deny or radically minimize these perpetrators' ideology, compromised values, and complicity in Trump's autocracy. Fox News is the most widely watched cable network in this country by a factor of 5. Is that true? I didn't think that was true. I thought that CNN and MSNBC were closer than that. By a factor of 5? No, I don't think so. Anyway, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe that factor of 5 thing. I think it's more like maybe a 5-3 ratio, or a 5-2 ratio, or a 5-4 ratio, something like that. Fox News is one. Okay. We can't dismiss Trump's willing executioner as mindless victims to the president's charisma and Fox disinformation, or as practical taxpayers who are just voting in their economic interest. We have to take their cognition and values seriously. We have to name their political alignment for what it is, a very conscious choice. They're not automatons sleepwalking through history and helpless to the reigning propaganda. They understand the massive incentive structures that draw them to willingly and actively support this autocratic regime. Wealth redistribution to the top, privatization, extreme incoming inequality, and ruling kleptocracy. Such are the hallmarks of this regime's totalitarian capitalism, one that exploits catastrophe to further undercut a fair economy, a robust middle class, and truly representative of a democracy. Most authoritarianism that exploits corruption is hatched in ethnic favoritism, and this one especially so. Whiteness, is what motivates this autocracy, even as it blinds Americans to its behavior. Democracy has been such an uncontested tenet of this country, an unquestioned norm, that we naively assume that all Americans still love it. In fact, its favorable traits, quote, good, unquote, fair, quote, unquote, quote, orderly, unquote, and stable, unquote, are implicitly associated to whiteness itself. White Americans like to think of fascism as a calamity that happens only to third world countries, or to dismiss its Western examples as historical exceptions. And then he goes on. to talk about what goes on, okay, in other countries. And he says, yet the modus operandi of Trump's willing executioners is to code America, this land, its heart, its patriotism, as white and Christian, and as having common sense. Those codes gloss over all the black vets in the military from the Midwest who died in combat. They gloss over the Tuskegee experiment. They gloss over the Justice Department's statistical findings of widespread race-based police brutality. Those codes dehumanize. Josh Hawley, Republican, senator, who's a Missourian, like many Trump apologists, once asserted that football players linking arms for racial equality was browbeating middle America. In reality, protest is, quote, actually middle America, unquote. Autocracy isn't just a question of censorship and violence. It depends on an exclusionary definition of homeland that suppresses ethnic dissent. God forbid that black people should protest for human rights in middle America. Were we in Hong Kong, the Republican Party would be praising us. New research reveals the extent to which authoritarianism impulses have found a significant grounding in the Republican base. According to new survey data from Larry Bartels of Vanderbilt University, slightly over half of Republican voters, both self-identified Republicans and independents who lean toward the party, strongly or somewhat agree with the statement that, quote, the traditional American way of life is disappearing so fast that we might have to use force to save it, unquote. And roughly 2 in 5 Republican or independent voters agreed that, quote, a time will come when patriotic Americans have to take the law into their own hands, unquote. And a whopping 3/4 agree that, quote, it is hard to trust the results of elections when so many people will vote for anyone who offers a handout, unquote. Okay, I'm going to skip very near the end of this now. Okay, to deny the link between fascism and Trump's willing executioners is to absolve yourself from having to confront the sabotaged census count, the unprecedented financial graft, and the worsening economic hardship. The Russian targeting of black populations for social media manipulation, and the 17 million Americans, mostly black, purged from the voter rolls between 2016 and 2018, with especially alarming voter purges in former Confederate states now governed by Republicans. As many white people toggle between the existential threats to their bank accounts, to their family's health, and meanwhile deeply distracted by the banal details of housebound life, so much Netflix, so many memes, they do not want to feel accountable to fixing a fascist state supported by a president's willing executioners. This article was supported by the Economic Hardship Reporting Project. Of course, based on all the evidence I've seen, I do not agree with the ideas here that the Russians are having a significant effect, okay, on our elections. Now, that may not speak to the question, okay, of whether Trump is doing his best to hide any evidence that Russians are. He may, in fact, be doing that. Okay, but all I'm saying is that those who believe the Russians are interfering and interfering in a decisive way have never revealed any decisive evidence that this is happening, or even that a significant amount of money is being spent to shift our preferences in elections. So I dissent from that part, okay, of this particular article. But the idea that the willing executioners of President Trump are here among us and that they constitute a large percentage of his supporters. I believe that that is definitely correct. So, the final thing I wanted to cover tonight was Assange. There was a very good article in The Intercept on the Assange case. I will share it with you. I'm not going to go through the whole article, but I am going to give you the decisive part. Headline is Crumbling Case Against Assange shows weakness of, quote, hacking, unquote, charges related to whistleblowing. The article is by Mika Lee. Mika Lee. I gave you the Hebrew pronunciation, I think. Mika. It was written on September 30th, 2020. Published then, anyway. Okay, so the point to note is that Trump was indicted by, Assange was indicted by the Trump administration in 2018, but he wasn't charged with espionage for publishing classified information. They charged him with a computer crime and later 17 counts of espionage in a superseding May 19th indictment. The computer charges claimed that in 2010, that Assange conspired with his source, Chelsea Manning, to crack an account on a Windows computer in her military base. And that the primary purpose of the conspiracy was to facilitate her acquisition and transmission of classified information. The account enabled internet file transfers using the FTP protocol. But new testimony from the third week of Assange's extradition trial makes it increasingly clear that this hacking charge is incredibly flimsy. The alleged hacking not only didn't happen, but according to expert testimony at Manning's court-martial hearing in 2013, and again in Assange's extradition trial last week, also it couldn't have happened. Not only didn't happen, according to expert testimony, but it also couldn't have happened. The new testimony reported earlier by investigative news site Shadowproof, probably reported there by Kevin Gustola. Let's see. Yes, it was by Kevin Gustola, who handles most of their stuff there of this kind. Also shows that Manning already had authorized access to and the ability to exfiltrate all the documents that she was accused of leaking without receiving any technical help from WikiLeaks. So the government's case appears to be rooted in offhand remarks in the chat logs between Manning and Julian Assange. There was a discussion of password cracking in there. But it may have been just because Chelsea Manning was interested in password cracking, because a lot of people where she worked were interested in password cracking. But the whole case against Assange with respect to computer crime is based on these chats. But in fact, none of the leaked information had anything to do with Assange helping Manning or giving Manning information that might have assisted in Manning's cracking of any passwords, because to release what she released did not require any password cracking. She already had the passwords, and she was already able to get all of the information that she would later provide to Assange. And in June 2013, at Manning's court-martial hearing, David Shaver, a special agent for the Army Computer Crimes Investigating Unit, testified that Manning only provided Assange with part of the password hash, and that with only that part, it's not possible to recover the original password. It would be like trying to make a cappuccino without any espresso. Assange was missing a key ingredient. At the extradition trial, Patrick Eller further discredited the computer crime charge, according to Shadowproof. He pointed out, quote, the only set of documents named in the indictment that Manning sent after the alleged password cracking attempt were the State Department cables, unquote, and that, quote again, the Manning had authorized access to these documents, unquote. Okay, and Eller said that other soldiers at the Army base where Manning was at, in Iraq, were regularly trying to crack administrative passwords on military computers in order to install programs they weren't authorized to install. And he said, while Manning was discussing rainbow tables and password hashes in the Jabber chat with Assange, quote, she was also discussing the same topics with her colleagues. This and the other factors previously highlighted may indicate that the hash cracking topic was unrelated to leaking documents, unquote. So there it is. The government's computer crime case seems to be collapsing or have collapsed. Now, I think the espionage case in general is clearly a political case. I'm not at all sure the government is going to be able to do what it wants to do with Assange in this instance. But we'll see. But I thought it was important to bring you the idea that the computer crimes case doesn't seem to have the evidence in back of that for them to convict Assange of that particular charge. So I think that's important. So that's what I had for tonight. I'm now going to consider your comments. Hopefully my StreamYard will give me the full set of comments tonight. I hope so. It does seem to start at the right time. So hopefully you're all here tonight. And I said, I thought I had signal on my other device, but it broke off, bad connection. And Rebecca McCloskey said, oh my God, Trump is so open about violating the Constitution. I know. Trump's thing about the violating the law has always been to violate the law when he wants to violate the law and see if anybody will bring him up short. That's his method. If they bring him up short, he'll retreat. He'll use lawyers first. If the lawyers can't win, he'll retreat. That's the way he works with the law. The Constitution to him is just another law. It's not sacred. The way he's going to work with that, he'll violate the Constitution until somebody enforces it against him. Nancy Pelosi never understood that. She should have impeached him from day one when she got back control of the House. She should have impeached him for violating the emoluments clauses of the Constitution. She had him dead to rights from day one because he retained control and ownership of his shares in the Trump hotels. And then people were booking business at the hotel because he was president of the United States, and he was profiting from that. If not strictly profiting, because the hotels were in a loss position, still his losses were greatly reduced because of the business he was getting by virtue of his being the president of the United States. He needed to divest himself of those properties, or any properties he had, on the basis of which he could earn money while being the president of the United States. Alva says, the needless letter, he's not thinking about the waste of trees for these propaganda letters. No, he's not thinking about that. Alpha says Florida has over 2,000 new COVID cases again since yesterday. Oh, amazing and terrible. Evelina says, I can hear you today. Thank you, Evelina. And Alpha says, hi, glad you're here. And he shows an ear. Alpha says, my captions went away, but I was getting them for days, and I had the sound as well. Let me see what's going on with the captions. Oh, I have the captions here. Thank you, Eli, and I will say hi, glad. Eli? I don't think I said Eli, did I? Well, anyway. Evelina says, haha, it's pretty cool, the captions, Dr. Joe. I didn't turn on the captions. Alva Romano said, thank you. Evelina said, I could have used the captions yesterday when I could hardly hear you. I don't know why you can hardly hear me. I don't understand it. I have the same setup. The only mic that's on is my regular mic. And that was the same as yesterday. Sometimes Facebook's really strange. Avril said, the Fed should send everyone Joe income, at least $2,500 to $5,000 instead of $1,200, because that way they can at least buy a secondhand car to sleep in, since everyone is getting evicted, and possibly maintain a driving job like Lyft/Uber. Evelina says, too dismal for words. And Deborah says, sorry, I'm tardy. That's okay, Deborah. A lot of us are tardy from time to time. That is, we're late from time to time. Kay says, our revolution is all about defeating monopolies tonight. Very good info there. I take it Matt Stoller was on there then. Matt Stoller, Dave Dayan, Dave Sirota. Evelina says, hey, Deborah. Evelina says, hi, Kay. Avril says, at least you're not a tardigrade. Kay says, hi, Evelina, glad to see you. Deborah says, hey, Evelina. Avril says, where's Wolfbrand? I don't know where Wolfbrand is. I invited him. Avril says, no, sure, they sure aren't for the people, Dr. Joe. Avril says, man, she's Mrs. Fascist with the neoliberal Bible. She's a Christian fascist, yes. In Mussolini's regime, there were plenty of Christian fascists, Catholic fascists in Italy. And of course, there were plenty of Catholic fascists in Spain, too. Kay says, she's from Pence's state. No real surprise. Pence put all those laws into place. I know. Bonnie is now sitting down and joining us. Evelina says, thanks, Dr. Joe, a champion of women's rights. I better be a champion of women's rights. Or Bonnie's going to fry me alive. And Devorah, too. Both of them.
Yeah.
Together. Yeah, Devorah is really tough. Alvaro says, wish we could abort these politicians and fanatical but Christian but nationalists. I don't know what you mean by abort, Alvaro. Evelina says, for. And Alvaro says, Thomas is, quote, Stephen, unquote, of Django. Clarence Thomas? Evelina says, preferably their policies. Alvaro says, current Christ Congress is a miscarriage of democracy. Not sure if I inadvertently stole that from somewhere. That's okay. It's still a miscarriage of democracy. Alvaro says, yeah, Sermon on the Mount. Evelina says, yep, laugh out loud. Kay says, I think her religious group is a right-wing Catholic group. Yeah, people of praise, it certainly is. Okay, and Rebecca says, the quote about building the kingdom of God is the most threatening in my view. I worry for the separation of church and state. Yeah, me too. First Amendment. Separation of church and state. You bet. And Avril says, holy shit, we're going to get The Handmaid's Tale if Aunt Lydia gets installed on SCOTUS. Oh, you're calling her Aunt Lydia, huh? Evelina says, sounds like a sect, okay. It's probably a cult. Like cultists here. Evelina says, we all agree with you there. It is Evelina. I don't think they like Pope Francis, laugh out loud. I don't think they like Pope Francis either, but they are mandated by the church to obey Pope Francis. This seems like a design, much like what was described in the Powell Papers, but instead of the Chamber of Commerce, it is being done by the courts to take over another branch of government. I think the Powell Papers provided for the millionaire donors, because I don't think there were many billionaire donors at that time, if any. I think it kind of provided them to buy the electoral system, the Congress, and eventually the courts. I think that was part of Powell's plan, that they would take over the courts too, if I remember correctly. Evelina says, probably thinks he's communist, laugh out loud. Kay says, no, I'm sure they don't, Evelina. And Rebecca says, is it time for guillotines yet? Rebecca, don't give them any ideas. Steve Volkman says, shared, hey, Steve, how you doing? Evelina says, yes, this is the trend around the world, takeover of courts. Alvaro says, those Christians are usually so repressed that they're inverted perverts.
I would never trust Republicans again.
But Evelina says, hello, Steve. And Bonnie says, I'll never trust Republicans again. I can't remember the last time we did trust Republicans. So what do you mean? Trust them again. Trust them again. I can't remember the last Republican I really trusted.
I thought they took an oath of office.
Yes, I don't remember the last time I trusted them to keep their oath of office. And Kay says, Avril, so is Pence. And Kay says, hey, Steve. And Avril says, howdy. And Steve says, hi, Kay. Always nice to see you here. Evelina says, you can be repressed and not a pervert, can you? Can't you? Yes, I think you can. And Kay says, thank you, Steve. Nice to see you, too. Evelina says, especially during COVID. Boy, my NC Democratic group is going crazy tonight. Laugh out loud. Keep getting notices from them. Ivor says, what are they hounding you about? And Deborah says, will the citizens rise up? Wasn't it predicted by Orwell that we're going to be too busy staring at our screens? Yes, it was. He thought we'd be too busy not only staring at our screens, but at Big Brother on our screens. Trump is trying to become Big Brother. Kay says, they aren't hounding about anything. I just get notices when someone posts there. I lived in NC over 20 years and have been in that group for a very long time. Marvel says, okay. And Rebecca McCloskey says, do you think it'll come to civil war, Joe? Rebecca, I think the possibility is there. I think the possibility is there. It could certainly come to widespread violence by Proud Boys and increasing numbers of people developing an Antifa ideology. I don't think Antifa is a threat. I think what Antifa is basically defense of our democracy against the fascists. So I see Antifa growing, stimulated by fascist violence. Unfortunately, Trump is encouraging fascist violence now to get a reaction from people who are anti-fascists. And then, of course, he'll try to take over as the law and order person. He's been trying that now for months. So far, it hasn't worked, but we have to see what happens. But I think the possibility is there. I think the period after the election to the inauguration is very, very dangerous. Avril says, no, it'll be bad for business. Pardon me for butting in. That's fine, Avril. It may be being bad for business is going to be the thing that actually saves us, because it seems like the business contributors are turning to Biden now in very, very large numbers, and that Trump is beginning to run short of money, so he's pulled out of advertising in many states, while Biden is getting the business money. And I think the reason why he's getting the business money is that the business people are beginning to worry about stability under Trump, that they've actually had a bad reaction to his sending troops into various cities and not a good reaction to his sending troops in. So Biden's getting all kinds of money. That may create a situation where Biden will be able to develop enough support that he will win really big. And if he wins really big, then the movement behind Trump may melt away for the time being. The meaning, though, of the article I went through on fascism is that fascism at this point in the United States is rooted in many people. There are many, many fascists. Trump is not the only one. He is just the first of their representatives that we have really noticed. If we dispatch him and we get back to the more normal, inverted totalitarian system that we were living under, and they continue to ignore the needs of the people, fascism will be coming back. I mean, you can already see that a leading quasi-fascist type of candidate who might move to try to create fascism in this country is Ted Cruz. And Ted Cruz is one hell of a lot smarter than Donald Trump. And he might be a much more effective leader for the fascists. Much more dangerous in the long run. Steve Wolfbrand says, Rebecca McClaskey, martial law more likely. We need UN election observers. And Rebecca says, I would say they have not gotten as far as some on the progressive path. They'll get there, and we can't reach them if we aren't in their chats being respectful but firm. At some point, they will respect you back. They being who? As long as what we post passes a credible fact check, truth wins out. Not against the fascists. Not against the fascists. The only way truth can win out against the fascists is if it accords with what they're feeling in their own lives. If they don't personally experience it, if the truth is a more abstract truth about society that their own people can lie about and twist in various ways, truth is not going to win out. The fascists are closed-minded enough that they can close out any source of information that they don't think is with them, and listen only to people that reflect their emotions and their sense of grievance. Kay says, they respect me and all in the group, which is why I stay in it. Alva says, well, the knowledge of MMT cements progressives to the vision and hope of a successful progressivism. Yes, I agree, Alva. Steve says, Germans are a strange group, but believe me, I know. But that evil lies in all humans. It does, and not only does it, I think you'd have to say today there's probably less chance of fascism succeeding in Germany than there is of fascism succeeding in the United States. I mean, it's not the Germans who have Trump as a leader. And as far as I know, the fascists are not doing too well in Germany today. They're stronger than they were, but they're still far from taking over the German state. Alvaro says, oh, captions are back just now. Kay says, NC was an N slash, I'm not sure what that was. NC was a blue state when I moved there in 1995. Didn't get ruined until 2010. It looks like it's tending back towards the blue now, Kay. And Rebecca says Fox News bought up all the local news stations, and in some areas, unless you have cable, is all you can get. That is why they are higher. Bonnie said, did Trump try to help sending help to California while fires burned? No, I don't think he did. I think he visited there, and he blamed California for poor forest management. Kay says, nope, Bonnie Firestone. Kay says, I have two granddaughters out in California I really worry about. We have a daughter in the Los Angeles area that we really worry about, but she's evidently in an area with not too many trees. So Steve says, Trump doesn't like us Californians, but Mexico sent us over 100 firefighters to help. That was really good, Kay of Mexico. Alvaro Mano said, he sent rakes. Evelina, Alvaro Mano, pretty cynical of him. Alvaro Mano said, Steve Wolpern, and he absolutely punishes blue states. He tries. That's another reason why he needs to be defeated. Because when it comes to assistance to our states, our presidents have to be as neutral as possible. It's the only thing consistent with the concept of the United States. To favor certain states over other states is un-American. It is disloyal. It is treason to the idea of the United States. Kay says, much of the land that burned is Fed land anyway. Evelina says, Julian Assange also revealed information about the UK, China, Russia, and Australia. He did. He did. And the UK and Australia are extremely angry at him for revealing that information. Alva said, you're right, at least that would have been a crumb like paper towels in Puerto Rico. Steve Wolpern said, Hitler used German mythology, which is very rich and deep, and the music of Wagner to convince the Germans they were superior to other humans. Yes, I know he did. And Kay says, my grandma came here from Germany in 1901 with my American grandpa. She was a German gypsy called Romas there. Yeah, Romas are all throughout Europe and the minorities all over. They're a very substantial minority in Spain. Avil says they were exterminated too. It's good that she immigrated before Hitler. Yes, they were. They were a favorite target, okay, of the Nazis. Avril says, oops, scroll down too fast. I got to get back to where I was. So, okay, says Germany went after the gypsies before the Jews back then. I don't know whether it was before the Jews, but I think as soon as Hitler got into power, he went after both. Alva says, thank the stars that Julian is catching a break. A little bit of a break. It's not really there yet. I think the break he needs is that Trump is beaten. And then Biden might just stop the extradition. I mean, maybe that's hoping for too much, but the Obama-Biden decision was that they weren't going to prosecute him for espionage. So that would be a damn good reason right there in terms of undoing things Trump did to simply withdraw the extradition request, whereupon Assange would become a free man and could go back home to Australia. Kay says she was a buzz, very strong woman, although not the usual grandma, for sure, laugh out loud. Huh. Steve says, still many Roma in Europe. I used to pick fruit with them in France when I was a vagabond hippie. Perhaps you can see people's future, Kay. Laugh out loud. Kay says she's one of the first watchwomen in the local railroad here in Ohio with a lantern back then to raise her kids after my grandpa died in the flu epidemic in 1918. Wow, Kay. Steve said, there was a weird moon rising in LA. It's 100 degrees. Kay says, Harvest Moon, Steve, is tonight. Okay. I think there's a weird moon rising as a song, isn't it? Comes from that film with Kevin Costner. And also Ray Dawn Chong was in that film too, I think. Kay says, was Zephyr Teach Out and Keith Ellison tonight, okay, on Our Revolution? Ah! Good people, Zephyr Teach Out, okay, and Keith Ellison. Okay, I'll tell you when Bernie lost the primary. It was when Keith Ellison was edged out in the election for the head of the DNC. If the DNC had been headed up, okay, by Keith Ellison in 2020, the primary election would have been fair and unrigged. Steve Wolfbrand said Catholic Church was complicit, okay, when Nazism. Yes, they were. Yeah, Pope Pius XII. K. Clark Ryan said, yes, Steve, we sure are moving in that direction, sadly. That also had to do with the anti-Semitism of the Catholic Church at that time. Which began to be ended with Pope John the 23rd. 3 short years, he changed so much in the Catholic Church. Alvarmano says, Trump awaits COVID test results after aide falls ill. Headlines 4 minutes ago. Should I stop for a silent prayer? Kay says, I heard that, Avro. Barrett seems well respected by colleagues and former students, hoping for the best. She sounds like she's 13 years old, though, but hopefully a good woman. she adopted Haitian kids and a special needs kid. And she did. She's certainly, I mean, she's clearly a very charitable person when it comes to conventional charitable things to do. I have no doubt that she's a good woman personally, but people who are ideological can privately be good people, and their ideologically based decisions can be very, very inhuman. Very, very inhuman. Avromano says, quote, Seagram liquor heiress jailed for role in U.S. sex trafficking ring, unquote. Al Jazeera News. That's really ridiculous. Avro says, 35-year study hints that coronavirus immunity doesn't last long. Live science. How can a 35-year study say anything about that? How can there be a 35-year study? The coronavirus is new. The coronavirus is a novel virus. All the evidence about it we have now suggests that that particular immunity does last long. I mean, I'm not sure what we mean by long, but that it would certainly last for more than a year. That if there is a vaccine that's effective against it, that it could be eradicated by an annual vaccine. I don't 35-year study, that sounds strange. Steve Wolfbrand said, both sides are planning a coup on November 3rd. God help us. Romano says, religious group scrubs all reference to Amy Coney Barrett from its website, The Guardian. That's interesting. And Steve Wolfbrand said, Doc, what caused the Spanish flu to suddenly disappear after 2 years? As far as I know, Steve, it was herd immunity. The Spanish flu spread to so many people so fast and so contagious. And some people, had a natural immunity to it, and others got it, and developed immunity. So herd immunity might have worked for the Spanish flu, but so many people died. It was really so bad. Kay said, Steve, back then, if people didn't wear masks, they got tossed in jail, for one thing. Oliver said, next, the presidential debate could allow the moderator to cut candidates' microphones, among other things. I'm wondering if Biden ought to have that debate with Trump. The real grounds for cutting off a debate is that Trump's actions in the first debate were such that he destroyed the idea of having a civil debate with an opponent. And the only debates consistent with democracy are civil debates where one side doesn't interrupt the other side. The networks, with their running of the debates, and the two parties have tolerated these interruptions on the part of candidates over the years. And the mainstream media hasn't clamped down on it because they think a certain amount of it is good television, that it attracts people to the debates. They think it's money in their pockets. They haven't recognized how excessive interruptions can be corrosive to the debates and corrosive to democracy. Now, Trump just demonstrated how corrosive that could be. I think that Biden should not do any more debates with Trump. I think the kind of debate Trump had is disrespectful of democracy. Biden ought to say so, and he ought to say no more debates, of that kind. I'm not having any debates with Donald Trump. unless he is in an enclosure similar to the enclosure that has been created for Julian Assange over in the UK. And then the moderators have to have the right to cut off the microphones right away. Kay says, going to be a town-style debate. How are they going to stop the interruptions in a town hall debate with the other guy sitting there? If the other guy is sitting there listening, the other guy is just going to interrupt. It's not going to help that it's a town hall, unless you have serious town halls, serial town halls, I mean. In other words, with Biden there for a half hour and Trump there for a half hour, and never the twain shall meet. What they should probably have is a first half, okay, where Biden goes first. Okay, let's say Biden gets 15 minutes or 20 minutes, and Trump gets 20 minutes. Okay, then they have a second half where Trump goes first, and Trump gets 20 minutes, and then Biden gets 20 minutes. Something like that. So that Trump doesn't always have the last word.
You still have to have it separated.
Bonnie correctly says you still have to have them separated because Trump is not fit company for anybody else in a debate. That animal is not fit company. That's it. I mean, tell him to go to a New York bar and have his debate there. He can debate with me in a New York bar. He'll find somebody who can outshout him pretty good. Avril says, a military first, a supercarrier is named after an African-American sailor, NPR. Kay says, your daughter is an adult. My granddaughters are still kids. Yep, my daughter is an adult. Not just an adult, she's a mature adult. My granddaughters are still kids also. I don't know if they're as young, okay, as your kids are, Kay. New moon rising. Avril asks if you have your slippers on. AOC asked the SEC to investigate the Palantir ahead of direct listing the Business Insider. Yeah, Palantir should be investigated. It's in collusion with the right wing. So Avril asked whether you have your slippers on. Yep, Bonnie got the slippers on. Kay says, yes, the gypsies were first. My grandma told me. Okay, I believe your grandma. Avril Mano says, Biden is chumly with HRC, and HRC wants Julian destroyed. I don't know if Biden is that chummy with HRC, Avril. Not that chummy. They weren't always on the same side in those inter-administration things. And by the way, she took the nomination away from Biden that he might have had in 2016. I don't know if he liked that. Kay says, very proud of my grandma. Avril says, new moon rising. Steve says, our thoughts and prayers are hoping for Trump catching COVID.
Everybody blow air in.
Yeah, Bonnie says everybody should blow air at him. Avril says, She adopted to indoctrinate those poor children, in my humble opinion. Kay said, laugh out loud. Grandma used to have Sunday parties at her house when I was a kid. Laugh out loud. She invited the family and her workmates. Laugh out loud. She could drink shots and smoke cigars with all her guy workmates. Laugh out loud. She must have been a heller, Kay.
A strong person.
Avril says, yes, please, divine interference. Wouldn't it be sweet, a Schadenfreude, Schadenfreude, I should say, if he died from his own genocide? Oh boy, that would be divine intervention. Steve Wolbrand said, Trump bitch slapped Biden like a pimp does. God, Steve. Oh, he says, slap Biden like a pimp does a hoe. I think that Avril laughed at that, but I'm not sure. I can't quite see the icon here. Kay says, I was one of the first women in this part of Ohio in the car parts business, too. When I started working there, mechanics used to say, a woman in a parts store? Laugh out loud. Steve Wolfbrand said, karma is a bitch. And Avril says, Steve Wolfbrand, only if you're one. Steve Wolfbrand said, I think your German is better than mine. Is it my German? I don't really know any German. Just a few words like Weltanschauung. And what else do I know? I know Schadenfreude. I know words like that. Basically literary words and some scientific words. And I guess I learned how to mock the accent. Avril Mono, I like the shock collar idea a great deal. It would help jumpstart Biden's somatic brain, and it would melt all that orange makeup off of Adolf Hitler. Steve says, I'd love to see Doc debate Trump. Avril says, I'd like to see Bonnie throw her slippers at Trump. Steve says, sounds kinky. And Rebecca McClaskey says, what we have is not a true debate. There is no structure or substance. High school debate teams should hold a debate before the presidential to give America an example of what they should look like. And yes, mics off or separate in booths that can be silenced like game shows. Albert says, oh, good to know. Julian does have a chance under Biden. I don't know. I just think if the Obama administration decided that they could not charge him with espionage as a publisher, Biden is probably going to respect that particular decision. That's what I think. Kay, she sure was a buzz, Joe. I'm a chip off her block, I guess. Laugh out loud. Alva says, you're really great with words. It's eargasmatic. I don't know who I should thank for that. Were you talking to me, Alvaro? I don't know. Were you talking to me or Steve Wolfbrand? Or maybe Kay? Anyway, I think it's time. I think that's it for tonight. But let me get a feel for something here. I want to ask you guys a question. Oh, thank you, Alvaro. Okay, I have a question to ask you guys. Would you like a Q&A on Saturday dealing with progressive short takes and live streams? Or would you rather have a regular show on Saturday? Tell me. Come on, all together now. You want a regular show or you want a Q&A?
Just say one or two.
And Steve Oprett said, Operation Paperclip. Nazi scientists brought to America after the war. I remember. Avril says regular show. That's one for regular show. And this array says a regular show. Steve says Q&A. Well, when I do a regular show, towards the end of it, you've got a Q&A anyway. That's what I'm, which is why I'm asking. Kay says regular show. Dolores says Q&A. And Steve says regular show with Bonnie. Oh, well. No, that's a new one.
Yeah, that's a new one.
Avril says a regular show, but you already voted, okay, for a regular show. So let's get some more votes in here. It's pretty close. It's like, by my count, it's 3-2 right now. And Rebecca says a regular show, then the Q&A. Well, that's a regular show. So, okay, it's close. So why don't I compromise? Okay, I will start with a regular show on Saturday, but it won't be as long a regular show. It will be shorter than usual. Okay, whereupon we'll shift over to Q&A. I'll do about maybe a half hour to 45 minutes, okay, of a regular show, and the rest of the time we'll have the Q&A. So we'll have both. And Steve says, bring Devora on the show. I think she'd be interesting. I think she'd be interesting too, but I also think that she doesn't want to come on the show for occupational reasons. Okay. She doesn't have a job, which she thinks would be insensitive to her coming on the show. So, and Rebecca McClaskey says D, but I will ask Devora and see if she wants to come on the show. I could certainly have her on the show. Avril says, laugh out loud. Trump says we can vote twice. And this array says, thank you. And Steve says, vote early, vote often. Okay, so thank you for coming. Okay, I'm going to say so long for now. I'll be back on Saturday night with a shorter show. Instead of taking about an hour and a half for the in-depth part of it, I'll take between 30 and 45 minutes, and then we'll shift over to Q&A. And we can have a very lengthy Q&A at that time as well. So that will be how we do it on Saturday. So thank you very much for coming tonight, and I will see you on Saturday night. By the way, I'll be releasing another short take on tomorrow, and I'm going to try to get in yet another short take beyond that. Laura says thank you and good night all. So long, farewell, da 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 da. And I forgot, well, there's short takes today. I put out one short take today. I put out 2 short takes on Tuesday. I put out a short take on Wednesday and a short take today. I have one short take that I banked. I put out a short take called Debt and the Desperation of Donald Trump today. And I have another short take scheduled for tomorrow. And I'm going to try to cut yet another short take, or maybe another 2. Steve says, sing us out. But whenever you ask me to sing, I get stage fright, so I can't think of any songs to sing. Avril says, okay, got to catch up with them. And Steve says, Keeper of the House, Les Miserables. I can't do Keeper of the House. I don't know Keeper of the House. The one I know best is Can You Hear the People Sing? Sing New York, New York. I don't know that I know that very well either. I'll think up something to sing next time. How's that? For next time. I'll rehearse something to sing. And Bonnie's going to groan all through it. Hey, Bonnie, how about you singing something? I said, how about you singing something? Bonnie says, no way. Laugh out loud. Sing ABC. Okay, folks, have a really good night. I'll see you Saturday. Steve says Mona Lisa and Mad Hatters.